Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we're going to be creating some simple, loose style watercolor florals directly in Procreate. So what you see on screen is exactly what we're going to be creating together. As always, the color palette for this project is completely free. There's a link in the video description, so just tap there and you can download and install it. I do want to mention that we are working in the watercolor style, and with the current default Procreate brushes, you will not be able to achieve the same type of look just using those free brushes. I'm using my Procreate watercolor lettering brush set. It is a paid product, but if you want to still follow along with the project and not have a watercolor look to it, it's totally fine to use any other brush that you like. You just want to make sure that it has pressure sensitivity. You just won't be able to achieve those transparency variations if you're not using a watercolor brush set. So with that said, I'm going to create a screen size document and then we'll get started. All right, I've got my screen size document. I'm going to drop in a background color, so tap on your layer palette, hit background color, and I'm going to choose the lightest color right here. It's at the very bottom all the way to the right. It's kind of a soft blush color. And the first thing I want to do is just walk you through how to create the different elements, and then we'll put them all together into our composition. So first we're going to talk about the foliage elements. They're the simplest elements, so I'm going to grab my green color right here. It's the very first one. And the brush that I'm using is my round paintbrush for illustration. That's part of that brush set, which is in the video description. For most of the leaves that we're using, it's going to be really simple. You're just going to draw a stem up, and then I create the shape of my leaf, so it's an outline, and then I kind of scribble or roughly color it in, and I always leave gaps in it. I believe that that really adds to the aesthetic of the watercolor feel of the entire piece. So I just kind of scribble it in, but I always have gaps in my leaves. The other type of leaf is kind of a teardrop shape. I use this one to fill in a lot of my white space gaps. After I've put my other elements in, it's a really nice little gap filler. So it's just a teardrop shape, and you can vary that in scale, which makes it really versatile. And then the last one is a branch with small leaves on it that are more round in shape. So I actually just take the tip of my Apple Pencil and I press with different amounts of pressure to create those little leaves. It almost looks like a eucalyptus leaf. So I just press down with different amounts of pressure, and then that gives me another supporting leaf element that I can use. If you don't like the look of the round leaves, all you have to do is make a more oval leaf and you can get an entirely different look. So this is another handy little foliage element that you can use. So next I'm using 3 different flower types. One is a bud, one's a simple flower with a stem, and then the last one is a rose. If you saw last week's tutorial, we already talked about buds. This one is actually an even simpler version of the bud. I'm going to grab my brown color to create a stem, and all you're going to do is draw 2 branches. You can do 1 branch or 3 branch, however many you'd like. I usually stick with 1 or 2 for this, and then I'm going to grab my pink color, and all you're going to do is put a dot at the top, and it can be an oval or it can be a circle, and it's that simple to just have a really loose style flower bud. Please remember that we are creating loose style watercolor florals, so there is no right or wrong. Just do whatever's comfortable to you. These are really simple shapes, just lines and circles. All right, so the next style of flower, I'm going to keep my pink color already and just draw 4 lines down, and they're going to kind of overlap each other. And then I'm going to grab my stem color, draw my stem down, and then put in 2 little lines where the transition happens from the stem to the petals. And it's that easy to create a little simplified flower. The last flower is our rose. If the rose feels a little too advanced, you are more than welcome to create a daisy. That's a nice little alternative for this larger flower in our composition. To make the daisy, you're just going to draw a bunch of petals, roughly color them in, and then you're going to drop in a center. So that's a simpler flower if the roses just feel a little too complex right now. To draw a rose, you're going to create a half circle, and then you're going to hook into that half circle. This is where the rose is really tight and closed up, and then you're going to come around with thicker lines. And you can see where the gap is right here. I always make sure I cover the gap. If I had a gap right here and then I make another gap, your eyes automatically run where this negative space is. It's kind of like a river, and you don't want your eye to go to those places. So you always want to make sure wherever you have a gap happening, you cover it up and you create a new gap somewhere else. So these are our new gaps now. So keep that in mind as you go around the rose. You're going to make your petals thicker and thicker. So just add in more pressure as you come around. And now I'm going to move to 3 petals around the outside, and then they vary in thickness, and then they start overlapping as well. So that's how to create a rose. I'm going to delete all these. Those are all the elements that we're going to be using for this. So we're going to start off by creating our largest elements first, which are our roses. I'm going to create 3 of them. I'm going to vary them in scale a little bit just to add a little more visual interest to the composition. So I'm going to draw 3 roses now, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my 3 roses. I'm going to label this layer roses. And then the next thing I'm going to do is drop in some brown leaves. So I'm going to create a new layer right above, label this brown leaves. And I'm going to grab my brown color, which is the first one on the bottom. And keeping my same brush, I'm going to create 3 large leaves right to the left side of each one of my roses. Okay, now we're going to put in 3 of our smaller flowers right in the center. So I'm going to grab my light pink color, create a new layer, call these small flowers, and I'm going to draw their petals right in the center. So they're kind of facing different directions. I'm going to create a new layer right above my small flowers layer and label this one small flower stems. And the reason we need the small flower stems layer above the small flowers layer is because our stems overlap our small flowers. So I'm going to grab my brown color again and then draw in these stems. So we just created our first cluster of small flowers. I'm going to add in some more clusters, but so we don't have everything being totally symmetrical where we have the 3 right here and then we've got our leaves in the same place. Now we're going to start changing up the positioning of our different elements. So I'm going to put another cluster of 3 flowers right here, and right here. So I'm going to do that now. And just make sure that you are on the right layer for putting your petals in on the small flowers layer and then putting your stems on the stems layer. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is start adding in our first green foliage elements. So we're going to use those branches with the smaller leaves on them. And I'm going to create a brand new layer and label this one green branches. And I'm going to grab my green color for this. And these ones are going to go, I'm going to add one right here. I'm going to add one right around here, right here, 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 and right here. So now we're going to start filling in some of this white space between our existing elements. So I don't want to put too many yet because I can always add more in later on. So this is my starting point. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is start adding in some flower buds. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, label this one flower buds. I'm going to grab my brown color and sporadically place these next to some of my pink flowers already. Okay, I've drawn in all of my stems, so I'm just trying to fill in some of these gaps, but still being aware of the other elements that I still want to place inside these gaps, so I don't want to have too many. I want a really nice balance between all my different elements. So I've got some stems drawn in here, and some of them have 2 branches and some of them have 1 branch. And I'm going to keep my flower buds on the exact same layer since these are really simple elements. If I need to get rid of anything later on, they're really easy to redraw. So I'm going to grab my pink color and then just put dots on top of all of these little stems. All right, now we're going to add in those teardrop leaves. So I'm going to create a new layer and label this one teardrop leaves. And I'm going to grab my same dark green color and start filling in some of these gaps with those teardrop shaped leaves. Okay, we just have a few elements left to go. I'm going to return to my brown leaves layer, and now I'm going to add in some smaller brown leaves to start filling in more of these gaps. So I'm going to reduce my brush size a little bit and just start putting some more leaves in some of these gaps. Okay, now we're going to add our berries in. So I'm going to create a new layer up at the very top, label this one berries. I'm going to grab my blue color, which is right in the middle at the top, and then just do some clusters of berries, varying up the pressure that I'm putting on my Apple pencil. So the last thing we're going to do is add in some soft leaves right around the outside, and that will kind of finish off our composition and tie everything together. So I'm going to create a brand new layer up at the top called a soft leaves. I'm going to grab my lightest green color up at the top. It's all the way at the end. And I'm just going to drop in those larger leaves wherever I see some gaps. Okay, so that is how to create simple loose style watercolor florals directly in Procreate. Once again, the free color palette for this project is right in the video description. You can download it and install it right from there. I've also placed a link to my Procreate watercolor brushes as well. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of new tutorials just like this one in the future. For more design and Procreate tutorials and freebies, head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com. You can also find me over on Instagram. My handle is everytuesday. If you decide to try this out and post it there, I would love it if you tag me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.